So life is wonderful. And I've actually already, it's just a little after 9:30, probably approaching 9:45. And I've already written my 750 words for the day, as well as 1,000 words for on my book. And so I am feeling pretty good after I don't know how many
Wow.
months this year when I didn't hardly write anything. Now I'm feel like I'm getting back on track. So
All before 9:30 in the morning. That's impressive. Productive day already. You can go to bed right now. You're good.
can turn off the lights, right? Speaking of which,
So I heard that you did the Courage to Shine summit last
I
weekend.
I did do the Courage to Shine summit last weekend.
So what was your role in it? What did how'd it go?
So it went well. It was a first effort, and so there's and I think honestly, I was looking at my Google Chrome to see what version it is right now. It's like
Hmm.
major version 85 or 86 or something. But there's like thousands of versions that have been built since
Hmm.
its inception, right? So
Right.
I know for me, I often worry that okay, the first time I've got to do something, it's got to be awesome, and don't in the past have not given myself much grace about not having exactly what I want when I press go, right? So anyway, back to the Courage to Shine summit. I think things went really well. I It wasn't exactly what we hoped for, but one, it was a whole lot better than what I feared it would be. And two, there was just some really cool things that happened in it. Some great presenters. Uh, I led a meditation publicly for the first time.
Oh, that was your first time doing that?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
so that was an interesting experience. In that, I don't know. I guess I still have some trepidation around the fact that I meditation is such a huge part of my life. I think meditation is awesome. It's a very very important part of my day,
Hmm.
and but I worry what other people are going to think about. Not only one that I meditate. I'm pretty open about that I meditate, but that I also lead meditations, and uh,
Hmm.
to but I
I haven't done it publicly. I've done it with a couple clients, but I haven't done it publicly. I admire that.
well, thank you. But it was the Courage to Shine summit, so it's like okay, so we're stepping out and having the courage to shine, right? So I led the meditation and got some good feedback on it and had a good experience. And it actually the idea that I shared through the meditation played a role throughout the rest of the summit. So the rest of the Friday night and then throughout
Oh,
Saturday as we were doing the summit. So it was
that was a great segue.
it was a good start. Yes.
Cool. Well, that sounds awesome. So we wanted to talk today about how sharing our story benefits anyone else, or how anyone else sharing their story benefits anybody else. Basically, like, what's the point of this podcast? Like, what's the point of everything we're doing? We sit
Right.
on here and we talk about ourselves.
Why
So
are we
what's the
owning our
why should people
unforgettable
listen?
story?
Right. So why should people listen?
Well, I think it's honestly going back to that meditation that,
Hmm.
when we have the courage to shine, and the meditation that I led was just going back to an experience that my family has been practicing for, I don't know, quite a number of years.
Hmm.
And what it is that on Christmas Eve, we gather all the candles in the house, lay them out on the kitchen counter, turn off all the lights, have one candle lit, and then use that one candle and light the next, and so forth. And so during the meditation in the summit, I invited everybody to imagine that they had a candle in their hands and they passed that candle, the light from that candle, to the next person in the Zoom room, right? So
Hmm.
you kind of have the Hollywood squares of images on the screen, but but one person is passing the candle to the next and so forth. So, and
Oh, that's cool.
I think that's similar to what it's like when we share our stories, right? When we share a story that is
Hmm.
inspired, that is has a light that we shine in our lives and in other people's lives, that it makes the world a brighter place, right? That
Hmm.
by having the courage to share our stories, it'll make it easier for someone else to, one, to know they're not alone, and two, to pass
Hmm.
that light along to the next person. And I'm reminded of an experience that I had just last night when I was at church and there were a bunch of us gathered around, and a friend was telling a story about of what's actually happening right now. His mother-in-law is on dialysis and having a
Hmm.
difficult time. I mean, just being on dialysis, that's got to be a difficult time by itself. But there's like all kinds of stuff that she's been dealing with, and
Right. Yeah.
they're, I don't know, there's a large distance between where they live and where his mother-in-law lives. And it reminded me of when I lived here in North Carolina 8, 10 years ago, and my mother's health started to fail.
Hmm.
And it just
Where
felt,
was she?
she was in Washington State,
Oh, okay.
so about 2,400 miles away from us.
Oh, yeah.
So it wasn't like I could just pop in and say, hey, hi, mom. I mean, I could do that on the phone, but as wonderful as our technology is, it's not the same as being in person.
Right.
And so this morning, I just sent this friend a text and said, hey, I sorry to hear what's happening with your mother-in-law. I remember when my parents' health began to fail and what that was like. And just my thoughts and prayers are with you. And so by just sharing that, and it was probably not even 100 words. I don't know how many words it was in the text, but it was a relatively short text.
Hmm.
But he just ex- responded and just said how much he appreciated me sharing my story with him, right? That I had gone through something similar to what he's going through right now. And at the end of it, he says, have a beautiful and bright day, and I said, back at you, essentially. But just that idea of, sharing our stories, letting people know that, when they're facing difficult times, that they're
Right.
not alone, and letting people know that you'll make it. You'll get through this. Things will work out.
Inspiring them to see that if you went through something similar, and you're okay these days as far as that goes, so
Right.
so um so inspiring him to know that, yeah, I realize how much it sucks for you right now, but just know that this isn't your whole life. This is a part of your journey.
Yes. Yeah. And there's, I mean, I miss both my parents,
Hmm.
but it actually, I think I appreciate them more now that it's not so easily to, pick up the phone or fly across the country or whatever, you
Yeah.
know, it's, and by just, and one of the things that I miss about my parents are the stories, that we're not creating, not telling, not sharing with one another, right?
Hmm.
And so I think one of the things that really connects us is the stories that we share. So we might be sharing our story. We might be talking all about ourselves. We might be, owning our unforgettable story, but it's
Right.
not just about us. Our the intention of why we're sharing our unforgettable story. And I think that all of us, you and I,
Hmm.
and uh, and everybody that's listening to this, has an unforgettable story. All we've got to do is kind of brush it off and, maybe shine it up a little bit.
Right.
Uh,
Polish it up.
But,
Yeah.
as we own our unforgettable story, as we own the value of that story, it can make a big difference, not only in our
Hmm.
own lives, but in other people's lives. It can make a big difference in the world.
I think that um what well, I wanted to mention also about the benefits to, like, when I like the benefits to sharing your story, the benefits that it brings to you and to the listener. Um, the the benefits that it brings to you is you get to, if you have to remember your story, because there's a lot of stories, there's everything you've ever experienced, there's a story in your head about it,
Mm.
and you're going to remember it, you know. Of course there are some things we block out, it happens. But if you're going to remember your story, it's a matter of how you want to remember it.
Mm.
There are lots of stories that we remember that, we remember them as trauma. We remember them as, this was painful, this was, I don't ever want to go through that again, I don't ever want to deal with that again, that kind of stuff. um, and there are other stories that, while they may have been painful at the time, those, to me, I use the word power a lot.
Mhm.
um, those are the stories to me, that's where my power lies, is it those are it's in the stories that are in my head, that of stuff that I've, I could say stuff that I've gone through, stuff that I've been through, but I prefer to say stuff that I've overcome.
Mhm.
I have been through stuff, I've dealt with stuff, but there's also a lot of things that I've overcome. um and sometimes I share the stories, and there are other times that I don't want to talk about stuff,
Mhm.
or certain things, but the whole point, though, is that it's my journey and I get to decide. um and as far as how I tell my story, I get to decide how it's going to come across. Do I want it to be a story pull that's going to get the reaction of, oh, you poor thing,
Mm.
oh, all that? Or do I want to get a reaction like, wow, that you've been through a lot, and look at you now, and it leaves them feeling inspired.
Yeah, and
So,
I
and
think
for me, the impact, for me, that's what that makes a difference to me. That's empowering to me, is the impact that I make with it.
absolutely. And in order for us to make that impact, sometimes we need to share our stories that aren't yet healed, not
Mm-hmm.
aren't yet that we haven't yet overcome.
Right.
But as we share that part of our story, that part of our journey, that I'm still figuring this out,
Mm-hmm.
uh,
Right.
that the kind of the burden of figuring it out gets lessened through the sharing
Mm-hmm.
of the story, right? And it gets lessened not only for us sharing with other people, but those oftentimes when we share those stories with others, they also feel that their burden is lightened a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Another
Right.
part of the summit this weekend was I was using the idea of Hans Christian Andersen's Ugly Duckling, and
Oh.
talking about, how we all have ugly duckling moments,
Mm-hmm.
moments when, like, who am I, and how do I fit in here, and I just don't feel very comfortable being in this costume of feathers, or whatever. Um, but as we and the turning point that happened, the way that I see it anyway, in the Ugly Duckling, is that the Ugly Duckling became the recognized that it was a beautiful swan
Hmm.
when it recognized that it was a beautiful swan.
Right.
It wasn't okay. A swan came along and said, "Oh, you're not an ugly duckling. You're a beautiful swan." the ugly duckling had to go through all these experiences of, okay, I'm not this, I'm not this, I'm not this. What am I? And by continually looking not only outside, but eventually looking inside and saying, oh, wow, I see my reflection in the pond now, and I'm not a duckling. Who is that? That's a beautiful swan. You know,
Right.
that the beautiful part of our story emerges as we continue to hold on to it, as we own that
Hmm.
unforgettable story.
Right. That's a great point. And as soon as they talking about what you're still working on, um, I always say the healing is in the story,
Mm,
um, because to me, and I kind of tested this on myself, and then I've kind of paid attention to other people as I've talked to, whether it's clients or friends or anybody, and I've paid attention to how people tell their story. Excuse me. And it turns out there really is truth to the healing is in the story,
hmm.
because I've paid attention to and I've listened to my recordings. I've actually listened to my recordings. That's how geeked out I got on this. The first time that I told a story, and then after I've told that same story, or my version of whatever that event was,
Right.
after I've told that story, 10 times, 20 times, 30 times, 100 times, each time I tell that story, there's a little more, I own a little more power behind it.
Mm, yes.
The first time that I tell a story, I always wind up with, like I was talking earlier about the reaction that you get. The first time I tell a story, I'm always going to get the reaction with, "Oh, you poor thing," you know, because it feels like it's something that's happened to me,
Mm,
like I'm lost. I don't know what I'm, like a scared little child,
right.
and I honestly, I play the victim. You play the victim from the first time you tell a story, but then every time that you tell that story and you gain a little bit of perspective, sometimes it's from hearing other people's feedback from it. Sometimes it's just hearing yourself say certain things out loud. My children are going to be 26 and 29 next month.
Wow.
How unreal is that? Just to hear certain things come out of your mouth
Right.
just sounds just
How did this happen?
incredible.
They were just born yesterday, right?
Exactly. Right. Wait, I'm a mom. I'm a mother of grown-ups, no less. So
Yeah.
anyway, so just to hear certain things come out of my mouth, that in itself, I don't even need feedback from somebody else. Just to hear it come out of my own mouth, I gain a new perspective.
Absolutely.
Um,
And that's one of the things that I find so
so by the
cool is that when
Mhm.
we express ourselves, and I really like the idea
Right.
of express ourselves. So we're taking it from within and we're putting it out there, right? We're um, one of the ways that I
Oh,
think about
that's a great point. I never thought about that. See, I never looked at that perspective.
but when we express ourselves, we get to
Sorry.
see or hear what's going
Uh-huh.
on. Like what you just said, my kids are 29 and 26 next month. That, and you hear yourself say that, it's like, wait, what? Really? And when we tell our own stories, as I like to say, our we are our first audience, right?
Mhm.
That we hear ourselves tell that story. And there might be other people in the room, might be hundreds of other people in the room, but we are also part of that audience.
Mhm.
And hearing ourselves say things, it's like, what? Wait, what do you mean I've got kids that are that old?
I'm not old enough to have kids that age.
Right. And but one, expressing it, and two, owning that story that we're telling, owning that,
Mhm.
wait, maybe I do have kids that age, or maybe I
Okay.
did have this challenge that I overcame, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe, wow, I do have this thing that I'm trying to overcome.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that as we tell our story, we make what is invisible more visible, right? It's one of the things I love about writing.
Mm-hmm.
There have been numerous authors who said something along the lines of, one of the reasons I write is to know what I'm thinking, is to see what I'm thinking and to see who I
Oh,
am, right?
I've never heard that. I that's so true. That is why I write. I write so that I can like make sense of things that are going on in my head.
Yeah, because I
Personally,
mean,
that's why I write.
when we leave it kind of swarming around inside, it remains kind of
Mm-hmm.
nebulous. But when we put it down on paper, we can start actually not only expressing it, but we can actually start editing it,
Mm-hmm.
changing the way that it is on the paper.
Oh, that's a good point.
We can start
Mm-hmm.
changing the way that it shows up in the world. So by
Right.
owning our unforgettable story, by expressing our story, sharing our stories with others, you know,
Mm-hmm.
we can make the world a brighter place, but we can show others that they too can own their own unforgettable story. We don't have the market on unforgettable stories. We don't, you know, there's no trademark. There's no,
Right.
everybody can have everybody can, and I believe everybody does have an unforgettable story, and by
Mm-hmm.
owning that unforgettable story, by us sharing our own unforgettable story, I'm hoping that, that we give others permission to share their unforgettable story. So while it may seem that
Mm-hmm.
we're just talking about ourselves, the reason we're talking about our stories isn't just because, we want to inflate our ego or whatever, but it's because,
It helps though.
yeah. And actually, it's interesting. I was looking up the word deliver this morning. So when we deliver our unforgettable story, the de is basically of, but the liver is not liver, like,
The
yuck.
body part.
But it comes from liberate. So
Oh, okay.
so
So
when
for like
we
freedom.
right, exactly.
Okay.
So when we are expressing our story, when we are delivering our story, we're setting it free, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're allowing other people to make of it what they will, but we also have the opportunity to make of it what we will ourselves.
Okay.
And so, you know, part of owning your unforgettable story, I believe, is delivering that story, sharing that story with others.
Yeah.
And as we heal our own stories, as we heal our own lives, then the story that we are creating, the story that are delivering,
Mm-hmm.
becomes, one, more free, but two, as the word that you expressed liking earlier, is, it becomes more powerful.
Mm-hmm.
That just as in
Um,
the candle, that one small candle might not be that significant, although if you turn off all the lights, one little candle can make a big difference. But as more candles are lit, as more stories are shared, that light becomes brighter, that the world becomes a brighter place because we're more free to share our stories with other people.
mhm. So I think that is the most important point. But as far as what to do with those stories, um, I think the most important part to understand is the emotions that are attached to the story. The I work with law of creation. I mean, I teach law of attraction, the creation. Oh yeah, kind of. Anyway, I
I haven't heard
teach.
of it that way before, but
I
that's cool.
haven't either. I haven't either. I don't know where that came from. Anyway, so law of attraction is based on emotions. The emotions that you feel are a guide to it's the universe offering you direction as to which way you should go. The things that, there are things, following your gut You know, as they say, follow your instinct, follow your gut, follow your heart, however you want to say it. Those, as you follow your heart's desire, though, that's the universe telling you everything you want is right here.
Mm,
It's right here if you just follow your heart and, you know, pursue your passions and, you know, whatever, all the woo woo, you know, whatever stuff, you know, that a lot of people don't believe in, but I personally have seen it to be true.
hmm.
But I understand why a lot of people are like, yeah, whatever. But at the same time, there are also the emotions that at times when you feel scared, you know, that's the universe saying, you know, there's a reason, you know, there's something left undone
Something
before,
unreconciled.
yes, before you can get to the next, you know, whatever the next step, the next level, the next whatever is.
Right. That reminds me of what I was thinking about this morning, and that is the difference between fact and fiction, right? You
Mm-hmm.
know, fact can be helpful, to know that
Mm-hmm.
it's 2,400 miles from Asheville to Seattle, was
Right.
helpful in kind of knowing, well, how long is it going to take me to get there if I fly or if I drive or if I walk,
Right.
they're
Yeah.
all very different experiences. But there's also, and one of the things that I hear a lot of kind of like people's resistance to law of attraction is people's comments about fiction.
Mm-hmm.
That I don't read fiction. I read fact. I read nonfiction, and I was actually one of those people too. Until I don't know how many years ago, but just a handful of years ago is when I started to pick up fiction again, and now I read at least read or listen to some fiction pretty much every day. And what I was thinking about is that, fiction is a more powerful, what I actually, the way that it began was thinking that, oftentimes a fictional novel is oftentimes more true than a factual book is, because
Yeah.
the factual book, just says, okay, do step one, step two, step three, and you're
Right.
there. And it doesn't really deal with all the setbacks and the difficulties and, the
Oh.
conflict that fiction tends to do. So there are you get there are more facts in a nonfiction book, but those facts don't contain all the emotional content, don't contain all the the setbacks and the difficulties that are encountered while living into those facts. So in my opinion,
Mm-hmm.
fiction is oftentimes, and I'm not at all alone in saying this, fiction in a lot of instances is more true than fact is.
I don't know why in this conversation, this thought has popped up a couple times, and I keep getting sidetracked. But the movie Wizard of Oz
Mm,
keeps popping into my mind, and I think right now that's a great way to put it. Is what I was thinking of is everything that you learn from that story. Um, of course, there's the whole journey. There's the whole journey, but especially towards the end when they, you know, when they figure out, first of all, she's always had a way to get home.
mm,
Um, you know, she's always had it within her. She just didn't know it. She had to
right,
realize it herself. And of course, the lion wanted a heart. He wanted no, he wanted courage. The lion wanted courage, and towards as towards the end as they're doing like I guess I call it like a summary, like a little wrap up of the whole culmination of the storyline.
right.
Well, they talk about, the lion showed courage when he, did whatever. So you've already had courage all along, and the Tin Man, showed compassion in all these different areas. So you've always had a heart. You wanted a heart, and you've always had a heart. Um, what was the scarecrow? What did he
The
want?
scarecrow wanted a brain. Wanted
Oh, right. And he's the one that came up with some ideas or something.
right.
So apparently you're already smart. So this whole I want to, all I want is a brain. Well, you already got one. You're
Right.
already smart. So
Yes.
the whole point is that it's a nonfiction. I mean, yeah, it's a fictional story that teaches you everything you need to know. Um, the moral of the story kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, it's the fiction that tells us the truth, right?
Right.
The truths about ourselves. You know,
Yeah.
you've got a heart, you've got a brain, you've got,
Right.
you know, what you need to get back home. That, that we already have within us what we need, but we have to recognize that. And that's honestly
Mm-hmm.
one of the values of story right there, is it helps us to see the truth.
Right.
Whether that truth is told in a fictional story or in a factual story,
Right.
that oftentimes we can see ourselves more clearly through. And I'm not saying everybody go out and tell a bunch of lies, um, but I am saying that the future that you imagine for yourself, the
Mm-hmm.
story that you're creating that has not yet happened, so it's not yet fact, there is an awful lot of value in that
Mm-hmm.
story that you're creating, right? There's an awful lot of value in the possibilities that lie
Right.
ahead that are not yet, that are more fiction. In other words, and I also looked up fiction this morning, and it's fiction is is invented. It is what is imagined.
Okay.
It's not fiction and untruths. Those are not synonymous. Um, what is synonymous is what, essentially, what could be. So the stories that could be, the stories that we want to be walking into,
Mm-hmm.
are, and the way that I drew it out this morning is like, it's the facts are the foundation, the ground that we're standing on, and
Mm-hmm.
fiction and the who we are right now. And then there's like the emotional component, the fictional component, where it's like we're aspiring to this higher level, we're aspiring to this greater sense of who we are and what we can be creating in the world,
Yeah.
right? And we need those fictional accounts, we need those not yet happened, not yet realized accounts, in order to help us to move forward and to create something that is not yet, does not yet exist in the world.
Right.
Martin Luther King's dream, was a dream, and it has not been realized, but it is a dream that we can keep alive, that we can
Mm-hmm.
keep aspiring to. And so that is another reason that we have to share our unforgettable story. Not only what's happened, but what is the future that we want to be creating for ourselves? What is a future that we want to be creating for the world?
Yeah. Um, so in regards to um, how do we think that uh, our listeners could incorporate this into
Well, I think it's part of owning their unforgettable story, right? And part of
mm-hmm.
owning that unforgettable story is, either is expressing that story,
Mm-hmm.
and expressing that story either through by sharing it with somebody else orally, through speaking, or through expressing it through writing or artwork or whatever,
Right.
but that it moves from inside to the outside, that it becomes, that it is brought out into the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things that I personally find incredibly valuable is having a daily practice where I do that, where I write whatever length that I write. And for me, that's 750 words at least every day. Um, but it's also, there's power in just having a creative expression, a way to bring our stories out into the world.
Yeah.
So my invitation to our audience is to find that creative expression in whatever form that may look for you.
I was just going to say that I know for me it's writing and for you it's writing, but I know people who paint. I know
Mhm.
people who draw. I know people who photograph, whatever kind of, or, build sculptures or statues or whatever, build things, whatever they want to do. Um, there's a, I think there has to be a creative expression of some sort. It doesn't have to be writing, but I think that's how you let your true self come out.
Hmm.
And it doesn't have to be good, and nobody has to, and it doesn't matter what it looks like. You don't necessarily have to be, this, the next Van Gogh or anything. Um, but the whole point is it's a creative expression. It's putting yourself out there.
Yes. Giving yourself permission to express.
Hmm.
And this is subject for a totally different episode, but one of the things that I found is I gave myself permission to create through writing, through photography, through drawing, through speaking, is that as we do it and as we make a practice of it, that it might start out really poorly. My
Hmm.
first photographs were terrible.
Mine still are.
And my first drawings were terrible, and I mean, but it's allowing yourself to do it anyway.
Mhm.
It
Right.
doesn't have to be this masterpiece that's going to go on some wall, or in some museum or gallery or whatever.
Right.
It's just a practice and giving yourself permission. And going back to what you were saying earlier about emotions, what is the creative expression that is calling to you?
Hmm.
If it's to draw, then draw. If it's to write, then write.
And
But
you don't have to decide on one particular avenue.
yeah, exactly. I mean, I tried a
You can
bunch of.
try if you don't know what your creative expression, what your favored creative expression is, try different things. Maybe writing is not your thing, so draw something. You can draw, just draw a bunch of gobbledygook if you want, or you can actually, you know try to draw something, a scene that you can see or whatever. Or you can, just try different avenues, take photographs. For me, taking photographs sounds it's I've started to, I'm not very good about pulling my camera out and doing it, but I have started to appreciate just being able to share, this is what I see through this is what I'm appreciating about this moment, is
Yes.
that look what I see, and I can share that with you or whoever I show that photo to.
So I think the pinnacle of our creative expression is just giving ourselves the
Hmm.
freedom to express.
Right. Exactly.
And so go out, listen to well, first listen to what's calling you to create, to express,
Hmm.
and find a way to express it.
Yes.
And until then, may your story continue to unfold and you find what the resolution that you are seeking.